الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. The month of Muharram is approaching, and inshallah next week, the same night, would be the first night of Muharram. Some of the brothers and sisters here may be here in Qom commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Some of you may be away. So for me this is the opportunity to share with you some of the ideas about the true meaning of mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and perhaps if you agree you can also share this with the people that you are going to meet, inshallah. We know that over centuries mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam has been always practiced by the lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam among Muslims and sometimes even non-Muslims. There are even non-Muslims who mourn for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and on the day of Ashura they show their grief over this great loss. Some of them may take part in the mourning sessions or processions for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Some of them may donate money. Some of them, when they have some needs or requests, they think that this is an opportunity that they can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. So this has been happening over centuries in different parts of the world. Now what we have is a rich culture of mourning or azadari for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, which is also very diverse and not always necessarily acceptable, although in principle and in essence it's very much supported by the Ahlul Bayt themselves and by our ulama, but sometimes because it has become so widespread and so diverse, and there is no central body to tell what type of mourning for Imam Hussein is right, what type is wrong. So it's possible that some ways of azadari that are practiced or are going to be practiced in future may not be that much acceptable. So for us, it's very important to now, before actually being in the process and the middle of azadari, to sit back and have a little reflection on the concept of mourning or azadari for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and then we can perhaps provide others with some guidelines. Let us first see what is mourning in general, and then reflect on the mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam in particular. In every culture, you find that whenever they lose a dear person, they mourn. If they lose their parents or their children or their friends, they feel very sad. But they also mourn. What is the difference between being sad and mourn for someone? It seems that to be sad is something that can be very personal, something that you can hide it. In some cultures, like Eastern cultures, they are very much expressive when it comes to their emotions. When I am sad, immediately I show it. When I am happy, I immediately show it. In some other cultures, they are very much reluctant to express their emotions. It doesn't mean that they don't have emotions, but they don't express it easily. It's very sophisticated. So sometimes maybe a person loves you but doesn't tell you anything, or maybe hates you, doesn't tell you anything. But in our culture, as soon as someone hates someone, this appears right in his face or in his words, if not in his actions and physical, movements. The same it is mourning. When we lose someone, we express this by putting on a special dress, by somehow stopping our normal pattern of life. Maybe I don't go to my office or my shop for some days. Maybe we, for example, hold a funeral session, we invite other people, we show this, we express this. And also we try not to smile or not to laugh. Not necessarily because we cannot smile or laugh, but we try to somehow show that we are sad. In some cultures it's not like this. The Ramadan, before last Ramadan, I attended a funeral in Canada. A good friend, a Christian friend who was a professor, passed away. And it happened that I was there for the months of Ramadan. So I traveled to that city to take part in the funeral. And it was obvious that everyone, was sad, especially family members. They were very sad. But something which was a big change or big, difference that I noticed was that even his own children, when they came to speak, they made jokes. They tried to make everyone laugh. And they thought in this way they are pleasing the soul of the dead person. And if it was someone unfamiliar with that culture, would say, oh, these people didn't love that person. But it was obvious they really loved him, but the way to express their sadness is different from us. So, to be sad is something, to express it is different. To feel sad is a human, automatic or natural reaction when you lose someone. But to express it can be partly natural and partly cultural. And therefore you can engineer that. Either you engineer this in one generation, so we say, for example, from today we decide to mourn in this way, or gradually, year by year, age by age, this is engineered and it's passed on to us. But anyway, this is not necessarily natural. And this is why you see that some people do it in one way, some people do it in another way. There are people who put on black dress when they go to funeral session, and there are people who put on white dress. Some people, when they go for a funeral, they put on white dress, not black dress. But for us, it's important to put on the black dress. Or, for example, if you look back at the history, there is a beautiful story which is reported by Herodotus, the famous Greek historian. He says that in the time of Iranian king Dariush, he was informed that some people in his empire, because at that time Iran was a big empire, and Greece was part of Iran, and India was another part of Iran. So he was informed that in his own empire, there are people that eat, they actually eat the dead body of their dead parents or relatives. And there are people who burn. So it's big, difference. So instead of burying the dead bodies, which was normal, or putting on some place like what the Zoroastrians do, on a top place, so that the birds, can come, they were either burning or eating. So he asked, this is what Herodotus say, and it is mentioned in many books about ethics also. So he asked representatives of both communities to come to his court. So he told the people who used to burn, and that was the Indians, why you burn? They said, we burn out of respect. We don't want their body to be deceased and their body to become, spoiled. We burn them by fire, and, this, keeps it safe from being spoiled, and also then we can keep the dash of the body. He said, how much should I give you so that you accept, instead of burning the body, you eat the body? They said, it's impossible. It's not a matter of money. If you give us millions, we are not going to eat our parents who are dead. Then he asked the people who used to eat, why do you eat? They said, this is a sign of respect. We eat them so that they become part of our flesh and blood, and they are preserved in us. They said, how much I give you to burn them? I said, how can I burn my father? I cannot burn my father. I must eat my father. So, some people use this example to prove ethical relativism, which is not really a good argument for that. But this shows that there is one fundamental principle and different ways of practicing. The fundamental principle is that you have to respect a dead father, a dead mother, a dead human being. You have to respect. You don't find any human being or human society would say, when someone dies, we put the dead body in a dustbin or in the rubbish. They want to show respect. So this is shared. This is common value. But then how to practice this, it depends on the culture, it depends on the worldview, it depends on the religion, on their philosophy, whether they believe in another life, they don't believe in another life. Many, many things can shape and form their practice. So when you see there are different practices, you must not think that they necessarily have different values. Sometimes it's one value, but showed in different ways. Sometimes people want to be hospitable, but to look after your guest can be exercised in different ways. Some people, when they want to be hospitable, they bring lots of food for you, and they bring food of 5, 6 people and put in front of you, and they insist on eating all those food. And some people are relaxed about food, but still they are hospitable. They try to look after you. Or in some cultures, to be a good guest and to show your appreciation of what your host has offered, you have to finish the food. So if you make the dish empty, it means that you really enjoyed the food. But in some other cultures, if you do like this, the host would feel embarrassed because the host would see that the food was not enough. So you should always make sure to leave some of the food there so that the host doesn't think that the food was not enough. So it's very much cultural. So it needs understanding and it needs intelligence to distinguish between what is the core value which is shared and what is the way of exercising your respect for that value or practicing that value. These are two different things. Let us go back to the issue of mourning. When you want to mourn for someone who has been lost, there is one core value, and that is to be sad, to have grief, to have sorrow, and at the same time respect and honor for that dead person, and express it. But then how to express it can be very different. It can vary from culture to culture, even from one person to another person. There are people that sometimes, for example, they prefer to read a book about the life of that person. There are people who prefer to listen to a song, for example, or an eulogy, for example, a Marsiyah, for example, about that person. There are different ways. There are people who prefer to have procession, to go to the street. There are people who prefer to sit in a Husayniyah. There are different ways. There are people who prefer to do it in the day. There are people who prefer to do it during night. There are people who prefer to do it day and night. So there are different ways of doing these things. We have to be very careful not to mix the essence and core of mourning with the forms of mourning. Especially because this is a very sensitive issue for us. This is something that we very much revere and love, to mourn for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So it has become very sensitive and emotional. As soon as you start talking about anything related to the mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you have to be very careful because there are people who may be emotionally attached. So for example, in the UK, there is a very well-known center in Manchester, and everyone knows there. In that center, at the time that I was there, and I don't know what is the case now, maybe not again the same, they used to keep a horse 52 weeks, 365 days of the year. They used to keep a horse inside the Islamic center and look after this horse. So every time several people must look after this horse, feed him, everything. Why? Because this horse has an important role. When they have processions in Muharram, this horse comes to the street. And this horse is a very important part of that procession and that mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And then gradually it became so significant that you have to speak with respect about that horse. That horse is not an ordinary horse. And then gradually, some people say that horse comes from the same family of Zuljanah or something similar to that. So things can be built around that. Even sometimes, you hear stories that I don't want to mention in this public place, how much people respect everything related to that horse, which makes no sense. And if you want to talk about that horse, no matter whether you are alim or not alim, your respect is as much as you respect that horse. If you want to say anything about that horse which is not respectful, you lose your respect. You can be cursed. So this is a very emotional issue. And unfortunately, in many cases, people don't make distinction between the essence of mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and different manners that they are brought up with in their village or their town or their country. They think everything is sacred. My fathers and grandfathers used to mourn for Imam Hussein in this way. You are asking me to change? How can I change this? I cannot change this. But this is not a good logic. If your fathers and grandfathers did something, it doesn't mean that it was correct. And even if it was correct at that time, it doesn't mean that it is correct today. And even if it is correct today in your own place, it cannot be necessarily correct in Manchester or in Washington. You have to be very much understanding and in control of your emotions to realize what is the essence of mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and what is the best way of doing it. Especially we have to remember that for us, mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam is not just to satisfy ourselves. Unfortunately, this is another problem that happens. Many of us mourn for Imam Hussein just because of reward. Or just because, we want to satisfy ourselves. I have to, for example, cry. I have to do something so that I am feeling that, alhamdulillah, my Muharram is good. This is not enough. We have to mourn for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but we have to choose a manner of mourning that can help the cause for which Imam Hussein alayhi salam was killed. Not just to satisfy myself. Maybe for me, in this Muharram, my duty is to travel and to speak about Imam Hussein's revolution with the people that they are not going to cry, but they are going to understand and to learn and respect. But I say, no, I have to be in my own town because, I want to take part in these majalis and I want to cry, I want to eat that blessed food. This is very important for me. To go away from this culture makes me very sad. I feel deprived. But it must not be a matter of personal enjoyment. Of course, everyone would prefer to stay in Qom or Najaf or Karbala and just take part in these majalis. If it is personal choice, for us it's easier not to go to any place and not to meet any new faces and any new people, just to sit at home and in your local, mosque or shrine and enjoy your Muharram. But is it what Imam Hussein expects from us? No. So we have to distinguish between the essence of mourning and the manner of doing it. So I say briefly what I think to be the essence, and of course you can have your own understanding. It's just something that I think is right and true. I think what is the essence is to be sad, to feel deep sorrow in your heart for the tragic event of Karbala and its aftermath. Because the tragedy didn't stop on the day of Ashura. It just started, if not started before, it started on the day of Ashura, but it continued. We should feel very sad. And this sadness, I have to make it very, brief. This sadness would reach its climax and its peak when you can actually cry. If you can cry, it shows that your sadness has become very strong. But if someone cannot cry, shouldn't, force himself or herself to cry. Inshallah, a time would come that you would be able to cry. What we have in our hadith is that the fact that you show understanding and sadness, this is greatly rewarded. Maybe you are able to cry, alhamdulillah. Maybe you are not able to cry, at least you pretend, at least you do tabaki. That is also rewarded. Don't think that if you have not, shed any tears, there is no value. The main thing is that you feel sympathetic to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam for this tragic event. You have this union with Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam so that their suffering counts as your suffering. This is a very important point. Your suffering is not because you have lost your own family members. When something happens to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and as a result they suffer, you also suffer. This is a very important sign of unity with Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam in your emotions, in your feelings. I don't have time to explain that then how you would